I was halfway through circling a lace neckline in my wedding magazine when Lily's laugh sliced through the dining room door, sharp, deliberate, and cruel. "She'll pay for everything," she said, and my name was the receipt. My parents chuckled, sealing the betrayal. The glossy pages slipped from my hands, landing silently on the carpet, while 5 years of therapy dissolved in an instant. They were planning a double celebration, my wedding and Lily's anniversary, financed by me. My chest tightened, breath shallow, hand trembling against the wall. This time I swore I wouldn't break. This time I would pay only for freedom. The hallway was dim. The late afternoon sun stretched thin through half-drawn curtains, and the air felt heavy with dust and secrets. I froze when I heard the voices, sharp and certain, tumbling through the narrow crack of the dining room door. My heart caught in my throat. I wasn't supposed to be home this early. If my meeting hadn't ended ahead of schedule, I would have missed every poisonous word. Lily's laughter was the first blade. "She'll pay for everything," she said, her tone dripping with entitlement, as if generosity had always been my assigned role. The way she said "she" made me feel invisible and essential at the same time, like I was nothing more than a checkbook with a heartbeat. My parents' voices followed, weaving smug approval through the air. My mother's pride was evident, my father's chuckle thick with satisfaction. Then came the sentence that hollowed me out. "Your anniversary deserves as much attention as her wedding." My father's words rang in my ears, stripping my celebration of value, reducing my future vows to a side act in Lily's personal spotlight. The wedding magazine slipped from my trembling hands, the glossy cover kissing the carpet without a sound. My fingers shook so badly I had to press one palm against the wall to steady myself. For a moment, I was no longer 38, standing in my parents' hallway in a tailored blazer. I was 10 again, watching Lily unwrap my birthday gifts, while everyone applauded her for being such a generous, big sister. The same old sting spread through my chest, the reminder that in this house, my milestones were always secondary. Memory pulled me further back to the day 5 years ago when my father had summoned me into his study with that heavy paternal hand on my shoulder. He'd said Thomas had lost his job and Lily's dream wedding was at risk. "Family comes first, Claire," he'd told me, his voice thick with solemnity, as if he were assigning me a sacred duty rather than draining my future. My mother had stood in the doorway with folded arms, her silence a weapon sharper than words. "If you really love your sister," she'd said, letting the sentence dangle, forcing me to fill it with my own sacrifice, and I had. $15,000, my savings, my tuition fund. I'd handed it all over, the memory of signing that check, of feeling the ink scratch across the page, like it was carving out my identity, still burned in me. I had dropped out of college, juggled 2 exhausting jobs, while Lily danced in a gown that cost more than the car I drove to those night shifts. The humiliation of that memory braided itself with the present, tightening around my ribs until my breathing turned shallow. I tried to swallow, but my throat felt raw. The clinking of silverware on the other side of the door was like nails on glass, a reminder that my family's betrayal came dressed in casual normalcy. I stumbled back, careful to keep my footsteps silent, and pulled my phone from my bag as if it were a lifeline. My thumb hovered over Ethan's name, the one person who had never treated me like an afterthought. I pressed call. He answered on the second ring, his voice warm, grounding. "Hey, beautiful, how was the meeting?" The words tumbled out, low and steady, surprising me with their calm. They're trying to do it again, Ethan, planning everything behind my back. My wedding, their anniversary, all rolled together, and I'm the one paying for it. He was silent for a moment, long enough for me to imagine his jaw tightening, his brow furrowing the way it always did when he was angry on my behalf. Then his reply came, simple and solid. Trust your instincts. The phrase wrapped around me like armour. My knees still trembled, but my spine straightened. His voice reminded me that I wasn't powerless, not anymore. The girl who once signed away her savings had grown into a woman who could choose differently. I ended the call and stood there in the silence of the hallway. My palm still pressed against the cool paint of the wall. My chest rose and fell with deliberate breaths. I whispered the promise I had buried deep 5 years earlier, now unearthed and sharpened into resolve. Never again. The evening air outside pressed cool against my skin as I hurried down the steps, my heels clicking like accusations on the stone. By the time I reached my car, my hands were shaking so badly that I dropped my keys twice before sliding into the driver's seat. I shut the door, but the silence wasn't comforting. It was thick, suffocating, amplifying the storm inside my head. I stared at the steering wheel, knuckles white as I gripped it. Memories clawed their way up, uninvited and merciless. I was 8 years old again, sitting at my birthday table while Lily unwrapped my presents one by one. My parents clapped, laughing about how generous she was to take the spotlight, telling me I was lucky to have such a vibrant sister. Even then, my cake sat untouched, candles drooping, as if the day had belonged to her all along. The sting of that memory pressed against the fresh wound I'd just received through the dining room door. I picked up my phone, scrolling aimlessly to keep my fingers from trembling. A notification blinked across the screen, a new Facebook post from Marjorie Bennett. Against my better judgment, I tapped. My stomach dropped. The post was written in her polished tone, full of exclamation marks and glowing pride. Thrilled to announce we'll be celebrating 2 beautiful milestones together. Lily and Thomas's 5th anniversary and Claire and Ethan's wedding. One unforgettable day. The comments had already begun stacking up. 47, 50, 53... as if each congratulations was another brick building the trap around me. Cousins I hadn't spoken to in years wrote about booking flights, neighbours talked about what dresses they'd wear. It wasn't a secret plan anymore. It was public, carved into the digital wall of family history. The betrayal sharpened into humiliation. My own wedding, hijacked and paraded online without my consent, as though my role was simply to bankroll the spectacle. My heart pounded, my breath coming faster. For a moment, panic threatened to win. I closed my eyes and called Ethan again. He answered almost immediately, his voice still steady, a tether in the storm. "Claire?" "They've already posted it," I whispered, barely able to form the words. "It's out there. Everyone thinks it's happening. It's not just talk. It's a promise they've made on my behalf." I heard him inhale sharply on the other end, and then his voice firmed. "Then we don't fight them head on. Not yet. If they've built this house of cards, let's gather the wind to blow it down. We need evidence. Solid. Undeniable. Don't confront them, not until you can make it count." I let his words sink in. The old Claire, the one trained to nod and swallow resentment, would have rushed back inside, desperate to negotiate, to beg, to keep the peace. But that Claire had lost too much already, $15,000, years of education, the belief that she mattered. The woman gripping the phone now had something different, a choice. A jagged wave of betrayal threatened to drag me under, but Ethan's voice became the lifeline. I forced myself to breathe slowly, to ground myself in his calm. My chest rose and fell in rhythm with his silence, and the raw panic ebbed into something colder, sharper, resolve. "I won't sign anything," I said quietly, testing the strength of my own voice. "Not unless I know exactly what they've planned. Not unless I can turn it back on them." "That's it," he said. "Trust yourself. Collect proof. We'll handle it together." The knot in my stomach loosened, just a little. The car smelled faintly of leather and the lavender sachet I kept in the glove compartment, grounding me. I leaned back against the seat, staring at my parents' house through the windshield. Behind those windows, laughter still rose, the clinking of glasses carried through the open kitchen window. They were celebrating the theft of my future as though it were a triumph. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like their daughter, the obedient, dutiful Claire who bent until she broke. I felt like something else entirely, a player preparing for a different kind of game. Not a confrontation, but a strategy, a hunt for proof. The fear still lingered, pulsing low in my chest, but it no longer paralyzed me. It fueled me. Humiliation gave way to calculation, despair to determination. The sinuous curve of my emotions twisted upward again, climbing out of betrayal into something steadier, fiercer. I whispered it once more, a vow reshaped in steel rather than shame. Never again. And with that, the first move of my evidence game was set. I told my parents I'd stay the night, a casual offer delivered with a practiced smile, pretending I wanted to sort through old boxes in my childhood room. They seemed pleased, Marjorie especially, her face softening as if my presence meant compliance. In truth, the thought of sleeping under their roof again churned my stomach, but opportunity demanded sacrifice. If they were bold enough to post my wedding as their achievement, then I needed to know the full extent of their theft. The house grew quiet by midnight, laughter long gone, the clink of wine glasses replaced by the hum of the old refrigerator. I crept down the hallway, barefoot, every creak of the floorboard a threat to my plan. My father's study smelled the same as it had when I was a child. Leather, tobacco, and the faint musk of old paper. My pulse drummed in my ears as I lowered myself into his chair and pressed the power button on the family computer. The screen flickered to life, casting pale blue light across the mahogany desk. I shouldn't have known his password, but years of patterns repeat themselves. Anniversaries, birthdays, golf tournament dates. On my third try, I was in. The inbox stared back at me, neatly organised by folders. One subject line caught my breath. Vendor payments, Claire. My stomach dropped as I clicked. Email threads stretched across the screen like a tapestry of betrayal. My mother's words, written with cheerful efficiency, spelled out the arrangement in black and white. Don't worry about the deposits. James and I assured everyone Claire will cover the expenses. Once contracts are finalised, she'll pay in full. Each vendor replied with gratitude, confirming details as though I had been part of the conversation all along. Hands trembling, I clicked an attachment titled Budget Final. A spreadsheet opened, colour-coded tabs lined neatly at the bottom. Venue, $22,000. Catering, $15,000. Entertainment, $8,000. Flowers, $7,000. Photography, $6,000. Dresses, plural, $5,000. My eyes locked on the bottom cell, bold and cruel. Total, $63,000. Responsibility, Claire Bennett. The words blurred, my vision swimming. It was one thing to overhear a scheme, another to see my name branded as collateral, as if I were a credit card with legs. I leaned back, the chair creaking under my weight, and pressed a hand against my chest. Then came the next blade. In the purchase history linked to their shared Amazon account, a line item glared at me. Wedding gown, ivory, custom fit. Not my dress. Another one, ordered 3 days earlier, paid with my credit card. The last 4 digits glared up at me like a personal signature, undeniable proof of theft. The betrayal sank its claws deeper. It wasn't just assumption or entitlement anymore. It was fraud. My throat tightened, bile rising, and for a moment I thought I'd be sick, right there on my father's pristine rug. I snapped a photo of the spreadsheet with shaking hands, then another of the email threads, then the dress order confirmation. Each click of my phone's camera was a nail hammered into the coffin of my family's excuses. But I knew I couldn't hold this weight alone. I dialed Jenna, my oldest friend, the one who knew the intricacies of the event world like a surgeon knows anatomy. She answered groggily, her voice muffled with sleep. "Claire, is everything okay?" My words came out hoarse. "No. They've been planning everything. Vendors, contracts, a budget. They used my name, my card. $63,000, a second dress." Silence stretched, then sharpened into outrage. "Claire, this isn't family squabble anymore. This is financial abuse. They're gaslighting you into funding your own erasure." Hearing those words aloud cracked something in me. Abuse, not sacrifice, not duty, abuse. The label felt foreign and heavy, but also clarifying, like someone had finally named the storm I'd been drowning in for years. Tears pricked my eyes, but behind them burned a steadier flame. "I can't let this happen again," I whispered. "You won't," Jenna said firmly. "You've got me now. Send me everything. We'll make sure this doesn't end the way they expect." I emailed the files to her before I could second-guess myself, the progress bar crawling across the screen like the first real step toward reclaiming my life. With each document sent, I felt the scales tip slightly, the balance of power shifting inch by inch. The study felt less suffocating when I stood. Betrayal still cut deep, but I wasn't standing alone anymore. For the first time that night, I believed in the possibility of winning. I sat cross-legged on my childhood bed with my laptop balanced on my knees, the glow of the banking app illuminating my tired face. My pulse quickened as I scrolled through recent activity, searching for the deposits I couldn't place, except they weren't deposits. Each one was a withdrawal, thinly disguised with vendor names altered in the memo line. What had looked like financial gifts were actually siphoned funds, little cuts that bled me slowly, disguised as generosity. The screen tilted in my vision as rage pressed hot against my temples. How long had they been doing this? How many times had I thanked them for their help while they'd been quietly cutting into me instead? Betrayal wrapped tight around my chest until I could barely breathe. I needed clarity. I called Jenna back, sending her screenshots of the transactions. "Look," I said, my voice tight. "They labelled withdrawals as deposits. They made it look like they were contributing, but it's my money moving out." Her sharp inhale came through the speaker. "That's manipulation at a professional level. They're rewriting reality on paper." Before I could respond, another notification popped up. A voicemail from Nora, Ethan's sister, a paralegal who had promised to keep an eye out. I pressed play, holding the phone to my ear. "Claire, I just got word from someone at the venue network. A call came in last week from a woman claiming to be your wedding coordinator. She said you wanted a smaller, simpler ceremony and didn't need their financial contribution. She left your name and confirmed she'd handle all details on your behalf. My stomach turned. My own family hadn't just stolen from me, they were impersonating me, constructing an alternate version of me who bent willingly to their will. A ghost Claire designed to erase the real one. I pressed a hand over my mouth, the betrayal so sharp it nearly knocked the air out of me. But behind the nausea was something else, a cold, growing determination. If they were willing to fabricate reality, I needed evidence that was undeniable, irrefutable, the kind that would hold even when their lies collapsed. I spent the next hour gathering everything: emails, spreadsheets, bank screenshots, the voicemail from Nora. Then I opened a group chat with Ethan, Jenna and Nora attaching every file. This is everything I have so far. I won't survive another 5 years of this. We need a plan, Ethan replied, almost instantly. Then we'll make one, together. Jenna, they've built their own stage. Let's make sure they trip over it. Nora, contracts matter. If they sign in their names, they're liable, not you. The three of them formed a triangle around me, steady and unshakable. For once, I wasn't the lone protector of a family that saw me as expendable. I was part of a team, and that thought alone shifted something deep inside me. It was Jenna who named it. 2 doors, she typed. They get the wedding they think they're building at Rosewood. You get the wedding you deserve at the chapel by the lake. 1 door leads to ruin, the other to freedom. My hands shook as I typed back, but this time it wasn't fear, it was adrenaline. 2 doors, I whispered aloud, the words tasting like strategy, like salvation. The sinuous wave of my emotions twisted again. Only minutes earlier I had been drowning in betrayal, every revelation pushing me lower, darker. But now, with evidence secured and a plan sparking to life, I felt the climb upward begin. Not triumphant yet, too fragile for that, but rising nonetheless. I leaned back against the headboard, exhaustion pressing against me, but under it a steadier current of resolve pulsed. They had tried to trap me with forged deposits and false identities, but in doing so, they'd handed me the very weapons I needed. I shut the laptop, exhaling into the quiet of the room. Fear still lingered, a shadow at the edges of my resolve, but I was no longer paralyzed by it. Instead, it would propel me forward, sharpen me. The first door, Rosewood, was already swinging open for them, and behind the second waited the life I'd choose for myself. The table gleamed under the chandelier, every surface polished to unnatural perfection. My mother had laid out the good china, the porcelain set reserved for holidays, funerals, and events that demanded performance. The sight of it made my stomach twist. The plates had always felt less like tableware and more like stage props, symbols of a family that valued appearances over truth. I slid into my seat across from Lily and Thomas, who were, as always, 15 minutes late, but unbothered. Lily's hair shone under the warm light, and she tapped her manicured nails on a leather-bound folder she'd brought along, like she was preparing for a corporate pitch instead of dinner. Thomas smiled politely, but looked more distracted than invested, as if even he knew what was coming. Once everyone was settled, my mother cleared her throat and beamed at me as though she were presenting a surprise I should be grateful for. "We have the most brilliant idea," she began, her voice laced with rehearsed enthusiasm. I felt Ethan's presence beside me, solid and grounding. He reached for the water glass, his movements calm, but I caught the faint narrowing of his eyes. He knew, as I did, that brilliant in my mother's vocabulary often meant catastrophic for me. She continued, hands folded like a pastor delivering gospel. Your wedding, Claire, and Lily and Thomas's anniversary. Such beautiful symbolism. 2 celebrations intertwined. We thought it would be simply perfect to hold them together. One unforgettable day. Lily snapped open her folder with a flourish, revealing colour-coded tabs and bullet-pointed lists. I've already mapped it out, she said breezily. We'll have a separate cake for you, of course, but the main design should match my original wedding. Continuity is key. And naturally, the decor palette will lean toward my theme. It photographs so well. The words pressed against me like weights, but instead of crumbling, something in me resisted. My lips parted, and for the first time in my life at that table, I didn't nod, didn't agree, didn't automatically say yes. Let me think about it, I said, my voice steady, almost casual. The silence that followed was thunderous. My mother's smile faltered for the briefest second, her jaw tightening. Alan blinked rapidly as if I'd spoken in a foreign tongue. Lily froze mid-page turn, her practiced confidence wobbling before she forced it back into place. Twist. My father leaned forward, resting his heavy hand on my shoulder with mock affection. Always practical, our Claire, he said with a chuckle that was meant to soften the blow. That's why we know you'll handle the finances. It's only natural. You're the responsible one. His words landed like a gavel, as if the decision had already been passed into law. The plates gleamed back at me, mirrors reflecting my role as the family's sacrificial provider. Rage and despair churned, threatening to drag me down. Under the table, Ethan's hand found mine. His grip was firm, his thumb drawing a steady line across my knuckles. The gesture was small, but its meaning roared louder than all their manipulations combined. You are not alone. Not this time. I tightened my fingers around his, grounding myself in that silent vow. My pulse slowed, my breathing steadied. They thought I would break on cue, as I always had, but something inside me shifted. The Claire who had handed over tuition money, who had smiled while her dreams collected dust, was gone. I'll need to review everything before making a decision, I added, carefully modulating my tone, neither defiant nor submissive. A statement that left room for manoeuvring but no space for blind obedience. The reaction was palpable. My mother's fork clinked against her plate, her eyes flashing irritation before she plastered on another brittle smile. Lily's lips parted, ready to protest, but she seemed momentarily disarmed. My father gave a low laugh, though it lacked conviction this time. I lifted my glass, taking a sip of water to mark the end of the conversation. Beneath the table, Ethan's hand never let go of mine, the silent anchor that reminded me I wasn't standing against them by myself anymore. For the first time in years, there was a crack in the script they had written for me. And through that crack, the light of possibility spilled in. Dinner carried on, though the food turned to ash in my mouth. My simple refusal to play the obedient daughter had unsettled them, and I could feel the current of disapproval ripple under every smile. They were regrouping, sharpening their tools, preparing to cut me back into place. Lily struck first, tilting her glass of wine with practiced elegance. "Remember when I helped you get that marketing job?" she said sweetly, her eyes glinting. "Pulled a few strings, made a call or two? You've always been so grateful. I'd hate for you to forget how family supports you." The words weren't a reminder, they were a leash tightened around my throat. Gratitude weaponized into obligation. My mother sighed dramatically, pressing her napkin to her lips, as if the weight of the world rested on her shoulders. "You know, Claire, with Grandma's heart condition, stress isn't good for her. She was so thrilled when she heard about the combined celebration. If anything changed now," her voice trailed off, heavy with unspoken guilt. Another hook, another chain. Then my father leaned back in his chair, swirling the last of his whiskey. "Think of it this way," he said casually, as if discussing the weather. "We'll help with the down payment on that house you and Ethan have been eyeing. But only if the wedding goes smoothly. Keep the peace, and you'll have a roof over your head." A bribe disguised as benevolence. 3 strikes in a row: debt, guilt, and bait. Each manipulation pressed against me like cold fingers at the back of my neck, urging me to nod, to surrender, to step neatly into the role they had carved for me. But under the table, Ethan's hand squeezed mine once, and the pressure sparked something different. Instead of shrinking, I straightened. Instead of breaking, I held. I smiled faintly, swallowing the bitter taste rising in my throat. "I'll keep that in mind," I said evenly. My voice gave nothing away, though my pulse hammered beneath my skin. The rest of dinner blurred, words swirling around me like smoke. I let them talk, let them believe they still had me cornered. But inside, the decision was already forming, cold and precise. If there was a contract, I would only sign it with Ethan beside me. 2 signatures or nothing. It was the one safeguard that would keep me from being erased entirely. Later that week, at the bridal boutique, I clung to that quiet resolve like armour. Jenna had come with me, her presence a shield against the inevitable storm. I had chosen a simple A-line gown, understated and timeless, nothing like Lily's elaborate Vera Wang. When I stepped out of the fitting room, Jenna's eyes lit up. "It's perfect," she said softly, but perfection rarely lasted long in Lily's orbit. She circled me like a hawk, her manicured finger tapping her chin. "It's a bit plain, isn't it? Nothing like my dress. But I suppose it's itchy, cha-akin, tins, da." Her tone carried just enough pity to sting. Then, as though fate itself had cued the moment, her arm jerked forward. A splash of red wine arced through the air, striking the ivory fabric in a violent bloom. The glass shattered against the floor, shards skittering across the tile. Lily gasped, hand flying to her mouth in mock horror. "Oh no, I'm so clumsy. Thank goodness you hadn't bought it yet." The boutique owner rushed forward with club soda. Jenna knelt to blot the stain, but I stood frozen, fists clenched at my sides. The crimson stain spread across the dress like a wound, and the humiliation burned hot under my skin. My mother laid a hand on my arm, her voice honeyed. "Don't worry, dear, this was meant to be. We'll find something that complements Lily's anniversary gown." Their trap had snapped shut again, neatly disguised as an accident, an inevitability. But I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I swallowed the fire and let it settle deep, fueling the plan, already sparking to life. They thought they had ruined me. They thought they'd forced me to choose their path. Instead, they had given me proof of their cruelty, their manipulation, their obsession with making me small. I forced a smile, though my jaw ached with the effort. "Of course," I said lightly, stepping away from the ruined fabric. Inside, though, I was already building my line of defence, one clause at a time. 2 signatures or nothing. Ethan met my gaze across the boutique, his eyes blazing with fury he kept contained for my sake. His small nod was enough. We were aligned. And though my family thought they had won, I knew the truth. I was no longer their pawn. The iron gates of Rosewood Manor swung open with slow, deliberate grandeur. as if even the hinges understood the weight of the wealth that passed through them. The driveway stretched endlessly, lined with manicured hedges, trimmed into perfect symmetry. Ethan's hand tightened on mine as we followed behind my parents' car. The building rose in the distance, stone walls, towering windows, chandeliers glinting even from outside. It was breathtaking, yes, but not for me. For me, it was suffocating. The moment we stepped into the ballroom, the ceiling arched above us like a cathedral. Crystal chandeliers sparkled overhead, scattering light across the marble floor, polished to a mirror's shine. The air smelled faintly of roses and something sharp, like wealth curated to impress. My mother's face glowed with satisfaction as she spread her arms, as though she were unveiling a masterpiece. "Isn't it perfect?" she cooed, her voice echoing under the vaulted ceiling. I forced a polite smile. Perfect for Lily, too grand, too crowded, too loud for the intimate ceremony I had imagined by the lake. But of course my vision was irrelevant here. Lily swept in beside me, folder in hand, already talking to the event manager about lighting, table arrangements, and whether the champagne tower should be 3 tiers or 5. Her energy filled the space like static, humming with ownership. Then came the twist I should have expected. My father handed me a folded sheet of paper with casual flourish. "We went ahead and expanded the guest list," he said. 200 should cover everyone who matters. 50 was never realistic. The words landed like bricks against my chest. 50 had been my boundary, the circle Ethan and I had drawn together. A day for the people who loved us, not for show. Now it was bulldozed without discussion, replaced with a crowd large enough to smother me. My breath caught, and for a moment I thought I might actually collapse under the chandelier's weight. Ethan slid closer, his shoulder brushing mine, steadying me. I inhaled slowly, forcing air into my lungs. The manager, Mr. Phillips, a neatly dressed man with a clipboard and an apologetic smile, cleared his throat. "If we're all agreed, I have the contract ready." He set the thick packet on a velvet-covered table, pages crisp, tabs neatly marked for signatures. Alan stepped forward with the confidence of a man who had already decided. He pulled a pen from his jacket pocket, the gesture rehearsed. "Let's make it official," he said, reaching for the first page. Every muscle in my body screamed, but my voice cut through the room before the pen touched paper. "Stop!" The word echoed sharper than I intended, bouncing off the walls and silencing even Lily. My father looked back at me, surprise flickering across his face. I took a step forward, my heels clicking against marble, each sound anchoring me deeper into resolve. "Both signatures are required," I said, my tone calm but unyielding. "Mine and Ethan's. Without both, nothing is binding." A charged silence fell. My mother's lips parted, ready to protest, but no words came. Lily's eyes narrowed, her folder lowering just an inch. Alan's pen hovered mid-air, his authority suddenly checked. Ethan moved beside me, his hand brushing the small of my back. He didn't need to speak. His presence was enough, a second pillar beside mine. The weight of the moment pressed against me, heavy but liberating. For once, I wasn't begging for permission or apologizing for boundaries. I was stating a fact, one they could not twist without revealing themselves completely. Mr. Phillips shifted uncomfortably, glancing between us. "She's correct," he said quietly. "Both parties must sign for the contract to hold." The power shifted in an instant, tilting away from the people who had always assumed I would bend. My father lowered the pen, his jaw tightening. My mother smoothed the edge of the tablecloth as though the fabric might disguise her falter. Lily's eyes burned into me, full of outrage and disbelief. I stood straighter, my voice steady. If this wedding is to happen at all, it will happen on my terms, not yours. The silence stretched across the ballroom like a taut string, ready to snap. My father still clutched the pen, his knuckles white, but I could see the first flicker of doubt in his eyes. My mother's carefully crafted smile quivered, the porcelain mask threatening to crack. Lily shifted her weight, folder pressed tight against her chest, her gaze darting between us like a predator thrown off balance. I reached into my bag and pulled out the manila folder I had prepared, sliding it across the velvet-covered table with deliberate calm. Before anyone signs, I said, we should all review what's already been promised in my name. Alan's jaw clenched. Claire, but I flipped the folder open, spreading its contents across the table like cards in a game I finally understood how to play. Printouts of the bank statements, each marked with withdrawals falsely labelled as deposits. Screenshots of the email threads with vendors, my name stamped across them as guarantor without my knowledge. The Amazon confirmation for a custom wedding gown I had never ordered, the last 4 digits of my credit card glaring back at us like a scar. Lily hissed, low and venomous, but Mr. Phillips leaned in, his brows knitting as he scanned the documents. These appear troubling, he murmured. I tapped the spreadsheet last, the one labelled Budget Final. My voice steadied, stronger with every word. $63,000, every vendor listed, and at the bottom, written in Lily's cheerful font, Claire's responsibility. The chandelier light refracted off the glossy pages, scattering fragments of truth across their carefully constructed illusion. My parents' silence was a confession in itself. Then came the twist they hadn't seen coming. I turned to Mr. Phillips. Can you show us the section of the contract that states who is legally bound to pay? He hesitated, flipping through the pages before tapping a clause halfway down. Responsible party, he read aloud. His finger landed squarely on the names signed in bold ink, Alan and Marjorie Bennett. As the contract holders, you assume all financial liability. The weight of those words filled the ballroom, pressing against my parents harder than any outburst could have. My mother's face paled, her lipstick stark against suddenly colourless cheeks. Alan lowered the pen, staring at the page as if it had betrayed him personally. I leaned forward, my voice quiet but cutting through the silence. I'll contribute $6,000. That's the deposit Ethan and I already budgeted. But the remaining $57,000, that's yours, by contract, by choice. Lily's face twisted, fury blotching her perfect composure. You can't do this. We told everyone they're expecting... I met her gaze, unflinching. You told everyone. You promised them a fantasy built on my name. If you want the spectacle, you can pay for it. The tension spiked, the emotional arc plunging into near chaos. My father's glare, Lily's sharp breath, my mother's trembling hands. For a heartbeat, I felt the weight of their fury, the familiar dread of disappointing them. But then, like the steady hand of Ethan at my back, clarity rose within me. For once, the power was mine. Mr. Phillips closed the folder, his tone final. Unless both parties agree and unless responsibility is acknowledged, I cannot move forward with the contract today. I exhaled slowly, the knot in my chest loosening as if I'd finally set down a burden I'd carried since childhood. The high, dizzying relief felt almost foreign. For years they had controlled the script, but here, in this grand ballroom, meant to showcase their dominance. I had turned the stage against them. Alan shoved the pen back into his pocket, muttering something I couldn't catch. Marjorie smoothed her skirt, eyes glassy, as though she couldn't comprehend losing control. Lily's lips moved silently, forming words she didn't dare speak. Ethan slid his hand into mine again, grounding me in the victory. Together we walked out of the ballroom, leaving behind the glittering chandeliers and suffocating grandeur. Outside, the air smelled fresher, cooler, as though the world itself acknowledged the shift. That night, in the quiet of our apartment, Jenna spread a map across the coffee table. "The lake chapel is available," she said, eyes bright. "Intimate, secluded, and perfect for your real ceremony." Nora added a folder of legal documents. "And now you have proof. They signed themselves into liability. You're free." The wave of emotions crested, rising from suffocating tension into a release so sharp it almost made me dizzy. Betrayal had pushed me down, but strategy had lifted me higher than I'd thought possible. I looked at Ethan, the corners of his mouth curved in quiet pride. "Then we plan the wedding we actually want," I said. And for the first time, I believed it. The morning of the so-called celebration arrived draped in tension. The air felt heavy, as though it knew 2 different stories were about to unfold. At 9 o'clock sharp, I snapped a selfie in the bridal robe Jenna had borrowed from her cousin's salon. I angled the camera carefully, ensuring the background gave nothing away. Just a blank wall, neutral lighting. My fingers hovered over the group text with my family before I hit send. "Getting ready, hair almost done." Running about 30 minutes behind. I added 3 champagne glass emojis, knowing they'd find the performance believable. Within seconds, notifications lit up. My mother. "Don't worry, darling. Guests are arriving. Everyone is thrilled." My father. "Minister has a tight schedule. Don't be too late." Lily. "Typical. Don't ruin this for me, Claire." I put the phone face down, suppressing the sting her words always carried. This time, her barbs would land on air, powerless against the truth I was protecting. Across the lake house living room, Ethan adjusted his tie, watching me with quiet steadiness. "You okay?" he asked. I exhaled. Better than I should be. Jenna burst through the door minutes later, slightly out of breath but glowing with the satisfaction of reconnaissance. "Rosewood is chaos," she reported, tossing her phone onto the couch and collapsing beside me. I parked down the road and slipped in with a clipboard so no one questioned me. "It's bad." My stomach tightened. How bad?" She grinned, half appalled, half delighted. "Guests are milling everywhere. Your father is sweating through his suit, trying to keep them entertained. Your mother keeps announcing minor delays, hair, makeup, photos. She's spinning stories faster than a spider. And Lily, oh Claire, you should have seen her." I leaned in despite myself. "What did she do?" "Full meltdown disguised as martyrdom," Jenna said. "She's telling anyone who will listen that you insisted on using her stylist, that you caused the delay, that you are sabotaging her anniversary celebration out of jealousy." The words landed sharp, but instead of cutting, they only reinforced the wall I'd built inside myself. I could picture it all. Lily, standing in her glittering dress, lips trembling just enough to suggest victimhood, voice pitched to draw sympathy from the crowd. It was a performance she'd perfected since childhood, and it was working. Guests nodding, murmuring, casting glances toward the empty seat reserved for me. I pressed my palms together, breathing deep. Betrayal, yes, but also validation. Every word she spewed only further illuminated the truth of who she was, of who they all were when it came to me. Ethan sat down beside me, resting his hand gently on my knee. "Let her talk," he said softly. The more she blames, the clearer the picture becomes. She's digging her own grave. Jenna nodded in agreement. Exactly. I recorded part of it. If you ever doubt yourself again, just listen to the way she weaponizes every word. This isn't family, it's theatre, and the curtain's about to drop. I let myself smile, small but genuine. My pulse steadied, the sinuous line of my emotions curling upward again. Even while Lily raged and shifted blame, I was here, surrounded by people who actually chose me. Through the window, the lake shimmered in the late morning sun, tranquil and unbothered by the chaos across town. It was a reminder that two versions of the day existed. One drowning in spectacle, the other breathing freely in simplicity. I stood, smoothing the lace of the gown I had chosen for myself, unruined by spilled wine, untouched by Lily's shadow. Let them wait, I said, my voice calm. We're writing our own story today. And for the first time, I meant it. At 12:25 p.m, I picked up my phone one last time. My fingers didn't tremble as they once would have. They moved with precision, having a minor zipper emergency. Start without me. Be there in 20. I hit send, watched the message land in the family group thread, and then powered down the phone entirely. No more notifications, no more demands, just silence. I set the device aside, a small coffin for the life I was leaving behind. Ethan appeared in the doorway of the lake house bedroom, dressed in his navy suit, tie straight, eyes warm. Ready? I looked at him, at the man who had stood by me through every manipulation, every scar. My lips curved into a steady smile. More than ever. Together we stepped outside into the crisp afternoon. The birch trees around the chapel shimmered with strings of white lights Jenna and her crew had strung that morning. Wildflowers from Ethan's parents' garden lined the simple wooden benches, their colours vibrant against the calm of the lake. 20 people stood waiting, just 20. People who truly loved us, who wanted nothing more than to see us free. Mrs. Whitaker, my elderly neighbour, dabbed at her eyes as she caught sight of me in the sundress I had chosen myself, plain and perfect. Nora adjusted the arch of greenery at the front, nodding approval. Jenna raised her camera, capturing each moment with quiet reverence. The music began softly, nothing grand, just the gentle strum of Keith's guitar. My steps were slow, unhurried, each one pulling me further away from the grandeur of Rosewood, closer to the life I wanted. Ethan met me halfway, his hand extended, his eyes brighter than the lake at noon. Meanwhile, across town, Rosewood Manor teetered on the edge of collapse. At 12:30, guests shifted in their seats, whispers rising like restless birds. The minister checked his watch, his patience thinning. My mother's brittle smile faltered as she made yet another excuse. My father dabbed sweat from his forehead, muttering into his phone. Lily paced near the champagne tower, hissing to anyone who would listen that I was ruining everything, that I was jealous, that I had always been difficult. And then Mr. Phillips appeared with the bill. The grand total glared from the page, $63,000, less the $6,000 deposit. He placed it firmly in front of Alan and Marjorie. As the responsible parties, payment is required today, he said. The ripple of shock spread faster than champagne could flow. Guests leaned closer, conversations sharpened. Some began gathering their coats. By the time the minister announced he could wait no longer, half the crowd was already drifting toward the exit, whispers of scandal trailing them. But none of that touched me here, beside the lake. Ethan took my hands in his touch grounding me in the present. His father, standing at the small wooden altar, cleared his throat, his voice steady with genuine joy. Dearly beloved, we are gathered here not for spectacle, not for grandeur, but for love. The vows came easily, not weighed down by rehearsed promises or gilded expectations. I spoke from the marrow of who I was, each word a declaration not only to Ethan, but to myself, that I would never again surrender my worth, that I chose this life, this love, freely. When Ethan slid the ring onto my finger, my chest ached with something vast and unfamiliar, peace. I do, I whispered, and the lake caught the words, scattering them across the water like light. The cheers from our 20 guests rang sweeter than any orchestra. Laughter mingled with tears, wildflowers bent in the breeze, and for the first time I felt weightless. The sinuous wave of my emotions, once plunged into betrayal's depths, now rose into a crest of serenity. Across town, my family's spectacle was unravelling. Here, under birch trees and open sky, I was finally home. The morning after the wedding dawned clear and bright, sunlight spilling through our apartment windows, as if the world itself wanted to mark the difference between yesterday and every day that had come before it. The scent of fresh coffee drifted from the kitchen, where Ethan moved quietly, giving me space to linger in the afterglow of freedom. My white sundress, still folded neatly over a chair, seemed less like fabric and more like proof that I had chosen my own life. The doorbell rang at exactly 10 o'clock. The sound cut through the serenity like a blade. Ethan and I exchanged a knowing glance, right on schedule. I smoothed my hair, squared my shoulders, and opened the door. My parents stood there, Alan's jaw clenched tight enough to crack. Marjorie's eyes rimmed red as though she had been crying all night. Lily hovered just behind them, her expression twisted between fury and something darker. Shame, maybe, though she wore it like ill-fitting clothes. "How could you do this to us?" my mother cried the moment she crossed the threshold. "After everything we've done for you." Her perfume, heavy and cloying, filled the space like smoke. Alan followed, his voice sharp. "You're legally responsible for that bill, Claire." "I don't know what game you think you're playing, but it ends now." I let them enter, calm and deliberate, and gestured toward the dining table where a leather portfolio sat neatly in the centre. Around it, I had placed framed photographs from the lake. Ethan and I laughing, holding hands, the birch trees glowing behind us, proof again of what was real. "Sit," I said simply. They obeyed, more out of habit than respect, though the tension in the room was electric. Lily stayed standing, arms crossed, glaring down at me like she could burn holes through my resolve. I opened the portfolio slowly, the ritual intentional, like revealing sacred relics. Paper whispered against paper as I spread the contents across the table. Copies of the bank statements, screenshots of emails, the fraudulent dress order, every piece of evidence I had carefully collected. Marjorie reached for one trembling, her eyes scanning the numbers with growing panic. This isn't what we agreed." "You never asked me," I interrupted, my voice steady. "You decided. You lied and you stole." Alan leaned forward, slamming his palm against the table. "We are your family. You will not embarrass us like this." I met his gaze without flinching. "Embarrassment isn't my doing. It's the natural consequence of your choices." The air thickened, the confrontation tightening like a noose. My pulse quickened, but instead of shrinking, I reached for the final piece of evidence. My phone. I tapped the screen, pressed play, and set it in the centre of the table. Lily's voice filled the room, high-pitched and unmistakable. She'll pay for everything, just like she did for my wedding. That's what little sisters are for." The recording crackled, followed by the unmistakable sound of my parents' laughter. The effect was immediate. Marjorie's hand flew to her mouth, colour draining from her face. Alan stiffened, his eyes darting toward Lily with something like betrayal of his own. Lily's jaw dropped before she snapped it shut, her cheeks blazing. "You recorded us?" Alan demanded, his voice low, dangerous. "In this state, one-party consent is perfectly legal," I replied evenly, "and I had every reason to protect myself." The words hung there, heavy and undeniable. For years, I had been their scapegoat, their provider, their silent witness. Now, I was the one holding the ledger, the record of every lie, every theft, every betrayal. Ethan moved quietly to my side, his presence a fortress, his hand resting gently at my back. Together, we faced them not as supplicants, but as equals. Or perhaps for the first time as adversaries on level ground. The silence stretched, punctuated only by the faint hum of the refrigerator and the racing of my heart. My family had come expecting submission, expecting to bend me once more. Instead, they found their own words turned against them, their laughter exposed as cruelty. And for the first time, I didn't feel small, I felt powerful. The weight of their silence pressed hard against the walls, but I didn't flinch. Instead, I reached back into the portfolio and withdrew a final envelope, thicker, heavier, marked with the embossed seal of a law office. I laid it flat on the table and slid it toward my parents. "This came from Nora's firm," I said calmly. "It clarifies exactly what the contract at Rosewood states. The people who sign it are the people responsible for paying it." Alan's face tightened as he tore the envelope open. His eyes scanned the letter, the colour draining from his cheeks as he read the words. Marjorie leaned over, her manicured fingers trembling as she followed along. The silence broke in a choked whisper. "But Claire was supposed to—" I cut her off, firm but even. "No, you were supposed to. You signed your names. You insisted. And now the responsibility is yours." Lily slammed her folder shut with a crack. "You can't pin this on us. Everyone knows it was your wedding. It's your—" "Everyone also knows," I said, voice sharp, "that I never agreed to fund it. The paper trail proves it. The recording proves it. The contract proves it. You built this entire scheme on lies, and the bill is your consequence." The room went taut again, tension vibrating like a wire about to snap. And then, unexpectedly, another voice entered. Thomas. He had been silent in the corner until now, but he stepped forward, his face tight with something between anger and realization. His gaze shifted from Lily to my parents, then back to me. "So you did the same thing 5 years ago?" he asked, his tone flat. "You drained her savings for our wedding, didn't you? You told me it was a family gift, that Claire wanted to help us." The colour drained from Lily's face. "That's different," she began, but Thomas shook his head, his voice rising. "No, it's the same. Exactly the same. You let her sacrifice her education, her future, so you could have your perfect day. And I believed you." The words landed heavy, ricocheting across the table. For once, the fracture line cut through them, not me. Alan glared at Lily. Marjorie's eyes filled with tears that no longer held manipulative power, only raw panic. Lily's jaw clenched, but she had no defence left. I breathed in, steady and deliberate, letting the power of the moment settle over me. Then I spoke the words that had crystallized inside me through every betrayal, every sleepless night, every stolen dollar. "This is not revenge," I said quietly, but the strength in my voice carried. "It's consequence." Alan slammed the letter down, his chair scraping harshly against the floor. We can't possibly pay $57,000, he snapped. I met his fury with calm. Then you'll have to explain to Rosewood why you signed something you couldn't afford. That's between you and them, not me. Marjorie's tears spilled over, smudging her mascara into black rivers down her cheeks. Why would you do this to your own family? She whispered. I straightened, Ethan's hand steady at my back. Because family doesn't bleed one member dry to keep the others comfortable. Family doesn't use love as leverage, and if holding you accountable costs me whatever scraps of affection you've withheld all these years, then so be it. The words settled like stones, final and immovable. I walked to the door, my heels clicking steadily against the floor, and pulled it open. Sunlight streamed through, warm and golden, in stark contrast to the chill inside. You can leave now, I said, voice clear. They hesitated, anger and disbelief flashing across their faces. But one by one they gathered themselves, Alan stiff with indignation, Marjorie stumbling under the weight of her tears, Lily silent and seething, Thomas trailing behind, his eyes lingering on me with something like regret. As they filed out, the door still open, the sound of laughter floated up the stairwell. Moments later, Jenna appeared carrying champagne and takeout boxes, followed by Nora, Ethan's parents, and Mrs. Whittaker, her smile warm and knowing, my chosen family. They entered with light, with ease, with love that asked nothing in return. The contrast was stark, almost cinematic. Manipulation leaving by one door as genuine care walked through another. I stepped aside to let them in, and as the door clicked shut behind us, I felt the chapter close with it. The house smelled of roasted turkey and sage, the kind of scent that curled through every corner and clung to your sweater long after dinner was done. Sunlight filtered through the kitchen windows in ribbons of gold, catching the edge of the crystal glasses I'd carefully set on the table. This was our first Thanksgiving in the new house, the one Ethan and I had saved for ourselves, plank by plank, paycheck by paycheck. The hardwood floors still gleamed with the sheen of fresh polish, and every scratch, every nail hammered in carried our fingerprints. Ethan leaned in the doorway with a glass of wine, his eyes finding mine across the dining room. 1 year exactly, he said softly, a smile spreading across his face. I nodded, my chest warm, my heart steady. 1 year since I'd walked away from the performance at Rosewood Manor. 1 year since I chose myself. I adjusted the centrepiece, crimson and gold chrysanthemums I'd picked up from the farmer's market that morning. Their petals spilled over the edges of the vase like fire caught in bloom. I was still smoothing a wayward stem when the doorbell rang. The sound snapped me upright. Guests weren't due for another half hour. Ethan raised an eyebrow, then came to stand beside me. We exchanged a silent question, and I crossed the floor to peer through the peephole. Lily. She stood alone on the porch, bundled in a camel coat, shoulders hunched against the November chill. No Thomas at her side, no dramatic entrance, just my sister, looking smaller than I'd ever seen her, like some of the air had leaked out of her carefully inflated presence. I opened the door, standing tall this time, not shrinking as I once would have. Lily? Her eyes flickered over me, taking in the house, the warm glow spilling into the doorway. She pressed her lips together before speaking, her voice quieter than I'd ever heard it. Hi, can we talk? For a heartbeat, I considered closing the door. A year ago, I would have hesitated out of fear. Today, I hesitated out of choice. I stepped aside. Come in, but understand, this is my home. You're a guest here. She entered cautiously, her heels clicking softly against the floor. There was no triumphant strut, no dramatic flourish. She removed her coat and folded it neatly over the arm of the couch, her hands trembling just enough for me to notice. "I came alone," she said quickly, as if anticipating my unspoken suspicion. "Thomas? He's not here." Her throat worked around the words. "He told me he'd leave if I didn't start therapy. Said he couldn't stay married to someone who treats family like a stepping stone." Her voice cracked on the last phrase. For the first time, she didn't sound manipulative. She sounded human, a twist I hadn't expected. I studied her face, searching for the familiar performance, the crocodile tears, the theatrical gasps, but her eyes were red in a way mascara couldn't manufacture. Her shoulders hunched not in drama but in shame. "I'm going 3 times a week," she continued, words tumbling out as if she'd rehearsed them in the car. "It's hard, harder than I thought. But I had to see what I'd done to you, to Thomas, to everyone." My throat tightened. I wanted to be angry, to hurl the memories back at her, the stolen savings, the ruined dress, the public humiliation. Instead, I just stood there, silent, unsure if the ache in my chest was fury or something dangerously close to pity. She lowered her gaze, her voice dropping. "I'm sorry, Claire, really. Not the way I used to say it, not to get out of trouble. I mean it. I was awful. I hurt you. I let Mom and Dad use you, and I used you too. And then, when you finally stood up to us, you made me see myself in a way I couldn't ignore." Her words cracked the floor beneath me. Not with destruction, but with a fault line I hadn't known could form. This was Lily, without the armour, without the audience. No laughter sharp as glass, no triumphant smirk, just my sister, stripped raw, admitting what I'd prayed for years she would see. Ethan glanced at me, waiting for my lead. I drew in a shaky breath. The wave of emotions dipped low, pain, distrust, memories of ruin, then lifted again, carrying me toward an unexpected shore. I gestured toward the dining table, toward the waiting centerpiece, glowing in the afternoon light. "We can talk," I said softly, "but this time we do it on my terms." She nodded, slowly, and for once, just once, didn't argue. The house filled slowly that evening, each arrival marked not by tension, but by warmth. Ethan's parents came with homemade pies, still warm from the oven. Jenna carried 2 bottles of sparkling cider, and Mrs. Whittaker brought a tin of cookies tied with ribbon. Conversations rose and fell with laughter, weaving a tapestry of belonging that felt nothing like the family dinners of my past. At one point, Nora's young cousin, barely 20, sat across from me, her eyes wide as she recounted the pressure her parents had put on her to abandon her art major for something more practical. She twisted her napkin in her hands, her voice small. "They said I was being selfish, that I wasn't thinking about what the family needed." Her words stabbed me with recognition, and for a moment I saw myself reflected in her hunched shoulders. I reached across the table, steadying her hands with my own. "Listen to me," I said, my voice firmer than I intended. "Boundaries are not walls. They're foundations. Without them, everything you build will collapse under the weight of someone else's demands." Her eyes shimmered, and slowly she nodded. Around us, the table quieted, every ear catching the words. I realized I wasn't just speaking to her, I was speaking to the girl I used to be, the one who needed to hear it most. Later, after the dishes were cleared and the laughter still lingered like embers, Ethan disappeared briefly into the bedroom. When he returned, he held a small package wrapped in silver paper. He placed it in front of me with a sheepish grin. "Happy anniversary," he murmured. My breath caught as I peeled away the paper. Inside was a shadow box, the kind meant to hold memories behind glass. Mounted at the centre was the receipt from Rosewood Manor, $6,000, our freedom fee. Against the burgundy velvet backing, it gleamed like a relic. Beneath it, etched in gold lettering, were the words, "Best investment in our freedom." The room blurred around me as tears welled in my eyes. My throat tightened, but this time it wasn't from pain. It was from the sheer swell of gratitude, of love, of the miracle of choosing differently and being chosen in return. I touched the glass lightly as if afraid the moment might shatter. Ethan leaned close, his lips brushing my temple. "Every penny was worth it," he whispered. I swallowed hard, my heart swelling in my chest. Around us, my chosen family raised glasses, not to obligation or resilience and second chances. When the house finally quieted, when the guests had gone and the last dish was stacked in the sink, I stood in the living room alone for a moment. On the mantel, our wedding photo from the lake smiled back at me. Ethan and I laughing, not looking at the camera, sunlight scattering across the water. Real joy doesn't pose. I traced the frame with my fingertip, the shadow box heavy in my other hand. The weight wasn't burden anymore. It was reminder. A reminder that I had stood, I had fought, and I had won, not just against my family, but against the version of myself that once thought love had to be earned through sacrifice. The sinuous wave of emotion settled now into something softer, gentler. Lightness threaded through my chest, warmth anchored in my bones. Some lessons are expensive, I whispered to the quiet room, eyes on the photo, but worth every penny. And I believed it with every part of me.